All right, and last time, what were we talking about? I know most of you were here. What were we talking about? The Sphinx, right? We were finishing up the Egyptian pyramids, right? Okay, and whenever I talk about a specific site, there are several things you need to know. You need to know when the site was built or when it was active. Okay, so for the pyramids, when was it built? Approximately.
2600 BC.
Yeah, about 2600 BCE, somewhere in that range. Good. All right, where? This one is obviously in Egypt, right? The Egyptian pyramids, which is at a latitude of what? Remember, latitude is the most important number.
26.
Now, 30 degrees. We did a drawing last time with the North Celestial Pole exactly. It's almost exactly at 30 degrees. Okay. And, well, sometimes we have to know stuff about the culture. Here, what we need to know is what are the astronomical alignments? We wouldn't be talking about it if there weren't astronomical alignments. So what are the astronomical alignments? Okay, there are shafts that point to specific constellations, right? One of the constellations is Orion or Osiris to them, right? What else? Thuban, okay. Was there a pole star? We have more. When's our first test? Yeah, it's next week. So we need to know this stuff, right? That's why I'm reviewing it quick before we go on to something else. You need to know this by the test. You're going to need to know these things, right? Okay. Isis. Yeah. Okay. Isis, which is star Sirius, right? Okay. What else? Well, Mizar and Kochab are the two alignment stars that they used. Okay. But one of the shafts did not point to Mizar, but it did point to the other one, to Kochab, right? Okay. What else? There's one main one that we talked about. Why are we talking about them right now? What direction are the pyramids lined up? Are they randomly placed on the ground? Yeah, they're lined up with the cardinal points, right? North, south, east, and west. And that's why we're talking about them, because they've made a really good job of lining these up so that they match those, because to them, cardinal points are really important. And where are all the pyramids? What side of the Nile?
West side.
West side. That was not by chance. That was chosen that way, right? Okay, which way does the Sphinx face? East. And which pyramid does the Sphinx go with? Khafre's, right? Not the Great Pyramid. It's the one in the middle. All right. Good. Those are the kind of things you need to know for the test next week, okay? Also on the test, there will be pictures, because I use a lot of pictures. Okay, now the PowerPoints are on D2L, so you can look at the PowerPoints. The problem is it's just the pictures. You don't get any words or anything with you. I mean, if you notice, I don't put any words, I just put up the words. So you have to have your notes so you can look at that and say, oh, okay, I know what that means, right? All right. Today, we're going to move on to another place where the cardinal points are very important. Maybe not. We're going to talk about the Pawnee technically we're going to talk about the Skiddy Pawnee if you want to be Absolutely correct. Pawnee is good enough. The Pawnee are Native Americans. Okay. Anybody heard of Pawnee before?
Mhm.
Most people I ask, how do they know that? Because they use the word Pawnee in Parks and Rec. If you watch Parks and Rec, they talk about the Pawnee all the time. Where is Parks and Rec located? Nobody knows. How many have seen the show? Oh, hardly anybody. Okay, so that's probably one. All right, so the Pawnee are Native American Indians, or well, we don't use the word Native Americans. We don't use Indians anymore. And they are where? They're located, or they were located right here, right in the center of the United States. What do we call that part of the country? Now, the Midwest is actually over here. This was the Great Plains. Okay. And the Great Plains is this area. It goes all the way from Texas all the way up to North Dakota. There aren't any mountains in here. Very flat, very open all the way up. And they were kind of in the middle here. Pawnee were here. These are other tribes that were related to the Pawnee at this time. Just a little more history. If you get further north up here, this was where the Sioux were. This was the largest tribe up there. There were many, but that's why the Dakotas, because it was the Dakota Sioux Indians. That's what it was named after. And who were the first ones that we have a good record of that actually traveled through here and talked with the Indians, you know? Lewis and Clark. Yeah, where'd they go?
They went to the Pacific Ocean
From where?
from the Missouri,
Yeah, what part of Missouri?
St. Louis,
St. Louis. Why St. Louis?
because it was on the Missouri,
Yeah, that's where the Missouri River runs into the
Mississippi.
right? And so that's where the Missouri River starts, and then it becomes the Mississippi. And so they just followed because, remember, Napoleon, we already talked about him once, we bought the Louisiana Purchase from him. What was the Louisiana Purchase? What did it say? Does anybody know? We're going to sell you all land that is drained by the Mississippi River. And since the Missouri drains the Mississippi River into the Mississippi River, anything drained on that was sold to us by the French, which was interesting because the French didn't really own it anyway. So really it was a deal to keep us from going to war over it. Okay. But so, and you're right, and Lewis and Clark were also trying to see if they could find a way to the Pacific by water. But they realized that didn't happen because once you get over here into Montana, you run into a whole lot of mountains and you run into the Continental Divide, which splits it. Everything on the west side flows in the Pacific. Everything on the east side flows into the Gulf of Mexico. So yes, but they came through here and they talked to all these Indians. Some of them were friendly tribes, some of them were not. If you read your history, one of the most scary moments was they were up here talking to the Sioux, and they almost got in a fight with the Sioux, and they probably wouldn't have made it very far. And that was really early in their trip. But we're talking about the Pawnee. Now, the interesting thing about all these Native American tribes is they didn't have any written language. So there are no books. They didn't keep any histories. So we're not sure how far back a lot of the history goes because it was just passed down by oral tradition, which is notoriously inaccurate. Meaning the stories are kind of there, but they get shaped and changed, and you don't really know how far long ago. So, but in the 1800s, especially in the middle 1800s, there became people being interested in these tribes, and they would go out, and that's when historians started to talk to these people and try to record their histories. So we know a little bit about it. That's where we get most of our information from the Pawnee is around that time. Now the Pawnee, we don't know how far back they date or how far back these Native Americans go, but we think it's anywhere from about 1200 on, which could be too far back, meaning they could have started about 16, 1700. Nobody's exactly sure when all these Native American tribes started here. Okay. Now people go back thousands of years here living in the United States. All right. So one of the things that makes the Pawnee, or one of the most interesting parts about the Pawnee, is they built what we call earth lodges. And these earth lodges, they called them turtles because they look kind of like a turtle. They would build them like this, where the entrance was over here, and it was made in a circle. But the entrance always faced east. None of their houses ever faced a different direction. They're earth lodges. They're called earth lodges because you see how they made them. They actually built them with poles. They put the poles as kind of top. Then they covered them in dirt, which sealed it and also protected them from the rain and snow and everything else. So it was actually a good way to do it. And I'll show you more pictures of it here. But the things we have to know is there were two pillars always at the entrance. And there were four main pillars on the inside. Now there may be more than that, depending on how big the earth lodge is, because they had to support the roof structure. But there were four main pillars. Over on the far side, there was an altar. What's an altar? Yeah, it's really just a table, but it's a very special table. It's a table used for religious purposes, which would be why we call it an altar. All right, now, to know why all this is done and why this is symbolic and significant to them, we have to understand their religion or their creation story. So their story, they have two main gods, a god and a goddess. Morning star is their male god, and he's usually represented with the color red. In fact, he's always represented with the color red. One of the post on this side down here, was painted red to represent morning star. Now, morning star, as is typical in most of these stories, wanted to get to evening star, which was the female version. Not represented by a color, but she's represented in the west side of the thing. So the altar, or this side of the earth lodge, where the altar is representative of evening star. And they believe that for mankind to exist, morning star had to get to evening star so they could have children. But instead of just going there, he had to overcome a giant beast. And then she sent 10 more other hardships that he had to overcome. And he had to fight through all these. And once he finally got through there, they got together, they had children, and from that they had a female child, and from that female child, all of humanity was born. Okay? The lodge towards the east represents morning star, but the pillars that are in here are at cardinal points. Technically, they're at what we would call subcardinal points. Because if this is north going up right here, then this post would be actually in the northeast. So this is the northeast, the southeast, the southwest, the northwest. And these were supposed to represent some of the hardships that morning star had to overcome to get to evening star. And when you do that, there's more to it than that. There are also different colors. This one was painted black. This one was painted yellow over here. I don't have a yellow. If I had one, you wouldn't be able to see it anyway. This is yellow. Then this one down here is white. And the last one is, I believe, red, yes. And the neat thing about it is there's 4 of them. How many seasons do we have?
4.
4 seasons. So each of these represented different seasons, and they represented different stars in different seasons. So lots of astronomical connections here. So the northwest one, which is yellow up here, is represented by the star Capella. Capella is a really bright star in the constellation of Auriga, and this also represents the season of spring. And each one of them has an associated animal with it. And this one was represented by mountain lion. Now the black one, there's no such thing as a black star because you wouldn't be able to see it. But that was Vega, the star Vega. This is in the fall or autumn, and is represented by the animal, the bear. If the lodge was a very fancy lodge, they would even have skins from these different animals around each of the posts. For the other ones, for the southwest is Sirius, which we already talked about. This is the white star. And Sirius is winter. And it's represented by the wildcat, which we would call like a bobcat. And the last one is Antares, and it's summer. And it's represented by the wolf. All right. So everything is very symbolic here, right? You don't just build a house to live in. It's built about your religion. Okay. Also, these were very large. They could sleep 20 to 30 people. This was what we would call a matriarchal society, meaning that the women ran the earth lodges. And when you married into a family, you would marry into the bride's earth lodge, and you would sleep in there with them. So you'd have grandfathers and parents and everybody sleeping. They had sleeping arrangements around the outside, cots around the outside. In the center, you would have a fire where you did all your cooking. At the top of the earth lodge, you would have an opening where the smoke could go out. All right. Let me give you more pictures here. So this is an actual earth lodge picture, one of the ones that they still had. By about the 1880s, what happened to most of the tribes in the Great Plains? They were moved on to reservations because the settlers were coming out and they didn't want to have the conflict, so they were moved away, and their whole history and culture kind of got changed. But look, here it is. So here's facing east. They had the hole in the center, what they call the smoke hole, where all the smoke could go out, obvious reasons. And you see they covered it in dirt, which acts as an insulation and a protection. All right. Other things that's interesting to note, I love this picture here. You see it's completely covered in dirt. It looks just like a mound out there. But what are these? Where do we go? What do we usually associate with where the Plains Indians lived? They lived in what?
Teepees?
Teepees. These are teepee poles. So these were what we call a semi-nomadic tribes, meaning they lived in their earth lodges most of the year. And they would plant crops, and they would harvest crops. usually corn and beans. Okay, but in the summer, they would follow the buffalo. Wherever the buffalo were, they would load up their teepees and they would follow the buffalo and slaughter the buffalo, so they had enough buffalo meat and hides and stuff to get them through the winter. So that's why they had both. They had permanent houses, but they also roamed the plains. Notice here's more earth lodges. Notice they're all facing exactly the same direction. Now, we think from an astronomical point of view that in the sky, morning star is represented by the planet Mars. Because Mars is red. And morning star was always associated with being red. And there's some interesting stories. One of them that's going to be your reading assignment, your first reading assignment that you have to go do, talks about this tribe, the Pawnee Indians, because they used to perform a sacrifice, a human sacrifice occasionally. Not very often, but every once in a while. When they needed to improve the fertility of the ground, to bring the rain, stop the droughts, what they would do is they would actually, one of the warriors in the tribe would have a vision that it was time to perform this sacrifice. And when they would do that was when morning star, they said, would be seen in the eastern part of the sky, which is what morning star represents, which means Mars would be seen in the east, we think. They would go to an enemy tribe and they would hide out until they could kidnap one of the young ladies from that tribe, usually a 14, 15-year-old girl. They would bring her back in the fall of the year, and she would live with them all winter long. But in the spring, when it became time for planting and harvesting, they would actually sacrifice. Well, when Mars is in the right configuration, Mars will be seen in the east, but 6 months later, Mars and the Earth have changed position, so it's seen in a different part of the sky, and that position of where it is in the sky is when they decide it's time to sacrifice her so they can improve their crops. Now, the whole thing is done very symbolically, meaning they worry about the colors, they build a scaffolding with all these separate colors, they use the separate animals, they use leather from each of these separate animals to tie different posts. They're exactly 4 posts up. And everything they do is symbolic of what they believe and how the earth was created, how humanity was created. Okay? It's kind of a hard story, but I want you to read it because it's very interesting. And it really gives you an insight into these kind of people. Okay? All right. This just gives you a little more detail. That's what I found about how one side of the lodge is represented by morning star, and the other side by evening star. Here. So the east is towards morning star and the west is towards evening star. On the altar here, they would have a buffalo skull and what they call the sacred bundle, which is a leather bundle. Within it might be like a pipe, like that you would smoke out of. It also might be things that are special. One of them had a part of a rock that fell from the sky. We would call that a meteorite, but that was special for them. Or other things that may be special for that particular lodge. Okay? Those were the sacred bundles. All that was put on the altar over here. On this side, this represented morning star. That's why I face east, because that's where the morning is, and the sun comes in through the center or through the entrance in the very morning. Now, it would only exactly come in around the equinoxes, right? Because the sun's position would change different places, and you see the people would sleep around the outside. This is a sacred bundle. And on the sacred bundle, like I said, they would have a pipe. They may have other things inside here that may be important to them. Kind of like people keep, historical mementos for your house, for your family. That would go inside there because the lodge is a family arrangement. All right, this one's cool. This is the top of a drum. They would make drums out of the leather they would take the leather and they would stretch it across a framework of wood, and then you could beat on it and you make drums, make sound. But they would decorate some of theirs with these. What's this?
Stars.
Stars, yeah. This is their constellations. Now, the interesting thing when you look at it is that if you try to match it up to our sky, it doesn't match at all very well. Meaning, it doesn't really match the real sky. But it kind of does. Meaning, they had certain constellations and certain stars that were very significant to them. And they show up very prominently on here. But they're not in scale or right brightness compared to the other stars in the sky. So if you didn't know which ones were important to them, it's hard to decipher what's going on. But I can show you a few here. First of all, can you see anything that looks that you would recognize at all? Yeah.
Orion's on the right.
Which one? Orion?
Yeah.
Not that we know of. Where do you think it is? Over here? Maybe. Now you are close though, because you see this right here? That's the Pleiades, right? This is a weird story too, but they thought the Pleiades were 7 brothers that were rescuing their sister from a giant rolling skull. Actually, 6 brothers, sorry. 6 brothers from a giant rolling skull. I'm not sure what that means. Like there's a giant skull rolling after her and they saved her. I don't know.
Like
but
Indiana
that's
Jones
what
style?
the story is. And you know, there's 6 of them. We call it the 7 sisters, but really with your naked eye, you only see 6. If you have really good eyes, you actually see 8 because the next 2 are almost the same brightness. So the 7 sisters was kind of a misnomer because we like the number 7. Okay, but that is the Pleiades right there. And if you know your constellations, you see this V shape.
There's Taurus.
This is Taurus. This is the Hyades. It's a cluster here, but this is the eye of the bull, and then it has horns that stick out here. The Pleiades is right in the back of it. So this is the actual constellation of Taurus right here. Okay. Now, with the way they have this set up, that would put Orion over here, but we don't really see the 3 belt stars. Now, it is possible that these are some of the stars in Orion. We don't know for sure. Okay. But yeah, so this is very significant to them. In fact, the Pleiades were also significant because they could use them as a calendar. When the Pleiades, 6 brothers who saved a girl from a rolling skull. But when you could see the Pleiades through the smoke hole, remember there's a smoke hole in the middle of it? Just after sunset, this meant it was time to plant your crops. So it was a calendar. The nice thing about the Pleiades is from our latitude, which they're slightly north of us or from their latitude, the Pleiades almost go straight over your head. So you can actually see them through the smoke hole. If the stars and the constellations are lower in the sky, you would never see them through the smoke hole. It's only ones that happen to go right through the part of that. All right, what do you think all this is right here? See all those little tiny ones?
Milky Way.
The Milky Way, yeah. The Milky Way, we know it's our galaxy edge on, and it's just composed of millions and millions of stars. They're just so faint we can't see them, so they all blend together, kind of make this cloudy thing going across the sky. But to them, this was the path of the departed spirits. So when you die, you go up to the sky, and this was all those departed spirits walking up to their afterlife. Good. Can you see the Big Dipper? Not quite drawn in the right place or the right shape, but you can kind of tell it is. No? I could see what you like there, you mean? Yeah, it's kind of like it, but that's not it. It's here. A little weird, because the Big Dipper actually, the handle should actually curve this way instead of the other way. Okay. And the Little Dipper is right next to it. You see the Little Dipper is right here. Where this is the head of the Little Dipper, and this is the stars, and this star is the pole star. What's our pole star? Polaris. That's why they made it bigger, brighter. This was important. To them, this was the chief star because all the sky would rotate around this star. And they didn't call these dippers or bears. They thought it was 4 people hauling a stretcher with a wounded person or a sick person, and then 3 people following behind. It was to remind them to take care of the sick and the injured in their tribe, which I thought was interesting. You don't usually see those kind of things up there. All right. Now the other ones that are up here are a little more obscure. You see this right here? It looks like kind of a C shape. This is the constellation of Corona Borealis, which we know as the northern crown. Okay. And it's in the constellation, it's a constellation right off the bright star of Arcturus, which we think this is Arcturus right here. But Corona Borealis right here represents them, the Council of Chiefs, all the chiefs sitting in a circle and discussing whatever the chiefs discussed. Now, the way the society was set up is the men would discuss, the men were the chiefs, and they were in charge of all things like going to war and where they moved and where they followed the buffalo, everything to do with where you live, where to eat, everything handled back at the earth lodges. That was all handled by the matriarchal society. So it was a very split society. Down here, this is supposed to be a constellation of Scorpio. And these 2 end stars are in the tail of Scorpio. You can see them actually as a double star. Kind of cool. But those represented, or they called them the swimming ducks. The thing about the swimming ducks is these were also a calendar one. When you could see them just before the sun would rise in the morning, that meant spring was there. It was time to get ready to plant the crops in the constellation of Scorpio. All right, and we found several of these. It's not just one star chart. We know that this was significant to all the Pawnee Indians. All right. Now, you have, remember I gave you a sheet with your reading assignments? You got 1 week, but I want you to read in the book Living the Sky. This book right here. It's in the library. Okay, so you can just go, it's on reserve, so you have to go to the desk and say you need it for class. I'm not sure it's online. It's kind of an old book, so it probably isn't. But you just check it out, and I want you to read pages 218 to 235. I think. Let me just double check that to make sure that's it. Yeah. And this is the story about the young maiden. Her name was Hoxie. She was the last one that the Skinny Pawnee sacrificed in the ritual. After that, pressure from all the new people, the new settlers and everything, forced them to quit doing that. And this was around 1830s or so. So you need to read that. It's a very interesting story. But I want you to read it before next Tuesday, because I want to talk about it in class, and actually I'll have a homework then that you'll have to answer some questions about it. So mostly it's just a test that you read it. Yeah. And you want to read it. It's a very interesting story. Okay. And look, it's only what, less than 20 pages. So it won't take you very long. You can read the whole thing in less than about a half an hour. Okay. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Who's the author?
Oh, good question. It's Williamson, Ray Williamson. And it's technically, it's Living the Sky, the Cosmos of the American Indian is the book. All right. Okay, next thing I want to do here is, remember those constellations I showed you? We're gonna look at them in the real sky. So I want you to picture this in your mind. And we'll compare it to what the stars really look like. And you can see that it doesn't really match what we expect to see here. What I'm saying is this wouldn't work well to be a star chart. All right, let's see if we can. All right, do you see any constellations?
No.
No, I haven't put the stars on yet. I was just testing. If you said yes, I would really have wondered about you. All right, here we go. Now you can see some constellations, right? Okay, I have the planetarium set up. So and I always start this way, south is towards the front, north is to the back, east is to your left, west is to your right. So which way would their lodges face? To the east over here, right? This is set up for a winter sky, so this is the way you would see it if you went out tonight and it was nice and clear, get away from the city. And truth is, around here, you never see the Milky Way that bright, but it's all right, it looks cooler in here. Definitely the Milky Way, right? And what was this under Pawnee? Yeah, the path of the departed spirit. Good. Now, right up here, follow my laser right up here. What's that?
Pleiades.
Pleiades. How many stars can you count there?
8.
It depends how good your eyes are if you've been to the eye doctor lately. Most people see 6. That little clump of stars is also on the front of the Subaru cars. In fact, in Japanese, it's called the Subaru. They named the car company after that little group of stars. It also fit in well because there were 6 gentlemen that got together to found the Subaru car company, and so it represented them. And so you see that on the front of the Subaru cars, that's their logo. But you notice it's flipped upside down from what we saw with the Pawnee. But they had this, and then they had a V shape. Here's that V shape right here. This V shape is the head of Taurus the bull, and that red star. Does that look red to you? I know you get messed up because my laser is very red. It's supposed to look red. It looks redder in the real sky. The planetarium, it's hard to pick it up. It's not that the planetarium doesn't make it red. It's just our eyes are not sensitive to color very well under low light conditions. But this is the head of Taurus the bull. And in our Greek constellation, Taurus looks like this. And so you see the V shape here. In fact, Aldebaran literally means the eye of the bull in Arabic. And then it goes out to these 2 horns out here. And the Pleiades are actually in the back of the, or the hump of the bull. Now, the easy thing is you go to Orion. Here's Orion's belt. And this was what we were talking about when we were talking about with the Egyptians. They called this Osiris. And the middle of the belt stars is exactly what they were pointing at, that ventilation shaft. Now, on the Pawnee one, there's some stars over here, but you don't see the real distinctive belt stars. They may be representing some of these other stars. We're not sure on that. Remember, it's not the scale, so you can't really exactly figure it out. But Orion looks like this. And supposedly in mythology, he's fighting towards the bull. Who's winning, Orion or the bull? Bull. Which way does the sky move? At night. I know you know this. We've talked about it many times. Which way does the sun go across the sky? From east to west, right? Because the Earth is spinning towards the east, so everything goes from east to west. So actually, Orion's winning. He's pushing the ball backwards across the sky. All right. Then from there, if you follow Orion's belt stars down, you hit the bright star called Sirius. Or if you're Egyptian, this is Isis. This was where one of the shafts pointed towards Isis. If we're in Egypt, we call this, we get it from the Greek, we call it the big dog. Actually, this is supposed to be Orion's hunting dog, but this looks like a pretty worthless hunting dog. There's two of them. This is Canis Major, this is Canis Minor up here. I'll show you. Yeah, here's your real hunting dog right here. Wagging his tail at the bull. They're not really helping him fight, are they? All right. Those are some of the stars we see in the winter. The only other one I wanted to show you was the star Capella, which is right here. See the marker up here? Very bright star. This star is one of the ones the Pawnee used on their post. Represents the Capella. That's their spring sky star. Right here. And remember Sirius, the bright star down here. And then Sirius, the bright star here. This is the brightest star in the whole sky. Easily seen. This time of year, you're going to have to wait till later in the night. It doesn't come up real early. Well, it depends on how low your horizon is to see it. But very bright star. Can't miss it. Winter sky. And it's easy to find. You just follow the belt stars downward and it point right to it. This is known as Isis, right, in the Egyptians. All right. But to the Pawnee, I also want to show you some of the other constellations. I'm going to turn those off. Those are the ones we see up at this time of year. But as the year goes on, we see different stars. That's why this is known as the winter sky. So I'm going to just rotate us around here a little bit. Go a little bit later. And we're going to go to the spring sky. So here we go. Let's go a little faster. So now Orion, which is the winter main one, is going to be way over here on the horizon, just setting. This is what you see in the spring of the year. And you got to stretch, especially for people in the front, because I want you to look way back here. Here's the Big Dipper right here. The Big Dipper is highest in the sky in the spring. But once you have the Big Dipper, it's easy to find a couple other stars. You just follow the handle, you go arc to Arcturus, which makes this, I call it an ice cream cone constellation. It's called Boötes. But if you look right to that, you see this circle, this C shape. That is Corona Borealis. We call it the Northern Crown, but that was, to them, was the Council of Chiefs. Now I'll show you what the picture that we have for it. Find it here. It's not in the storm. No, it's not that critical. What I want you to do is just know that it's right here. It's actually not a very prominent constellation, is it? The stars aren't very bright, and it just kind of blends into all the rest. But it was significant to the Pawnee. They looked at it and said, oh, that must have meant something there. All right, I'm going to go a little further. We're going to go more towards the summer sky. Coming up right now. So about every 90 degrees, you get a new constellation or a new season. All right, stop. All right, right down here, way down here low, is the constellation of Scorpio. Right here, you see this long tail. These are supposed to be his claws out here. This is the body. This is the two stars in his tail. This was the tail of Scorpio. Those two stars they called the sitting duck constellation. And this bright star right here is called Antares. It's a red star. It actually is one of the ones that gets confused for Mars. That's why it's anti-Aries, meaning it's not Mars. Remember, Aries is the same god. So this was Antares. It's the heart of the Scorpio right here. And that was one of their constellation stars. This is their summer star, the red star. And these two stars here, when they were rising around the sun, did signified the beginning of springtime. All right. I'm going to turn this around. We're going to face north. And in northern sky, we already talked about the Big Dipper. Here's the Big Dipper right here. Okay. Remember, what's this star right here? Give you a hint. This star and this star were the alignment stars the Egyptians used. This one is. I can't hear you. You got to say louder. And this one is. This is Mizar. This is Kochab. Also going to test your vision. If you look at Mizar, it's actually a double star. Do you see a second star?
Yeah.
Yeah, where's the second star? What clock position? If 12 is straight up, what position is it at? Yeah, it's about 2 o'clock. You see a little star off at about a 2 o'clock position there? If you haven't had your eyes checked recently, you might not see it. But Mizar and Kochab, the star and this star, that's the ones that they would draw a line in. And they would wait until it rotated around. And back then, remember, the North Celestial Pole is right between them, right here. And they would wait till that was straight up and down using their alignment plumb line. And that's how they would determine exactly north, south, east, and west. Okay. This is the North Star right here. Or the Chief Star if you're the Pawnee Indian. Now, if you're Egyptian, what did you call all these circumpolar stars? They were called the imperishable stars because they never went below the horizon. They never set. All right. Any questions about that? All right. I'm going to bring the lights back up. Set the sky. Now, there is a good chance we may not have class on Thursday. You're watching the weather. There's an ice storm coming about Thursday morning. I think it's likely that school will be closed, but we'll just have to wait and see. They're not going to call it early because sometimes we're going to have an ice storm, and then it all just kind of fizzles out and misses us. So, but right now it looks like there's no way we're going to get missed. It's just nobody's sure how bad it's going to be. It's one of those things. I mean, the high on Thursday is 24. So there's just no way we're not going to have freezing weather. When you have freezing weather and water, which we're supposed to have, is supposed to be 100% rain, something bad is going to happen. It's either going to be sleet, snow, or ice. Ice is the worst. So we're hoping that doesn't happen. But the good thing is it's not going to be as bad as last year, because last year, if you went through the snowpocalypse, we had pretty much 10 straight days of not getting above freezing. That was what killed us. For this one, by Saturday, it should be 40-some degrees and almost everything will probably be melted and gone. So it won't last real long, but planning ahead. So if we have class, we will. I will be here and teaching, but if we don't, we will just move on. Any questions about the Pawnee? Okay. Black marker doesn't like it, huh? All right. Now we're going to go back to astronomy again before we talk about some more sites. Okay. What we're going to talk about is zenith viewing chambers. What's your zenith?
The point directly above,
Straight up, right?
9 degrees above horizon.
So grab your protractor. We're going to draw pictures again. All right, so we're going to do another herb diagram. Didn't do one. I just have to move it. Need more room on the board. Okay. First, we're going to do Herb in Commerce, Texas. So here's Herb, standing at the center of the diagram. What's the latitude in Commerce?
33 degrees.
33 degrees north. Thank you. So we're going to put our north celestial pole where?
Horizon.
So, yep, put your front here and go up 33 degrees. There's our north celestial pole. Draw that line. We're going to put our protractor lined up on there. Okay, we start diagrams, right? Okay.